Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every life, a quiet, unsettling pause, when the noise of the world no longer satisfies, when the opinions of others feel like shadows cast upon the walls of our inner sanctum. It is in this moment, stripped of distractions and expectations, that we are faced with the most important journey of all, the journey inward. Today I speak not of grand achievements or the roar of applause. I speak of stillness, of solitude, of the silent, patient work of becoming oneself. When you focus on yourself, when you choose silence over reaction, stillness over noise, everything, eventually, falls into place. You can wander across continents, accumulate accolades, gather possessions, or even surround yourself with admirers. But none of these can fill the quiet, lingering void that exists when the self is left unexplored. The truth is unsettling. Everything external is temporary, fragile, and at the mercy of time. Your achievements can rust, your titles can be stripped, relationships can shift, and people can forget. But there is one domain that no one can invade, no circumstance can destroy, and no illusion can replace, and that is the self. The inner world, your psychological and emotional core, is the only real territory you truly own. Yet, paradoxically, it is the territory most often abandoned. From a young age, we are conditioned to look outward. We are taught to measure our worth by comparison, to define ourselves through reaction, to find our identity in what others see. We are praised when we conform, rewarded when we comply, and corrected when we wander inward. Slowly, imperceptibly, we forget to look within. We forget to ask ourselves what we believe, what we need, and who we are when no one else is watching. Our lives become a performance for an invisible audience, and we confuse applause for authenticity. But beneath this performance lies a self that quietly waits, observing, longing to be acknowledged, not by the world but by you. To focus on yourself is not selfishness, though it may be misinterpreted as such by those who benefit from their distraction. It is rather the most honest act of responsibility. It is a return to center. A stepping away from noise, a refusal to be scattered by the demands and judgments of the external. When you begin to focus inward, you begin to see the mechanics of your own mind. You notice patterns that once ruled you unconsciously. You trace emotions back to their origins and realize how many of your reactions have been inherited, conditioned, or fueled by unresolved pain. This self-inquiry is not always comfortable, but it is the only path to freedom. As you turn your gaze inward, something remarkable begins to occur. The chaos of the outer world loses its grip. Not because the world has grown quieter, but because your inner structure has grown stronger. You are no longer thrown into anxiety by disapproval, no longer swayed by praise, no longer trapped in cycles of seeking and performing. You begin to inhabit yourself fully, not the image of you that others expect, but the deeper self that does not shift with the seasons. In this state, you move differently. You speak with intention or not at all. You choose your battles, you conserve your energy, you observe rather than react. You become less predictable and more authentic. People around you may not understand this shift. They may feel distance, threatened, or confused. Let them. Their discomfort is not a reflection of your failure, but of your transformation. When you stop abandoning yourself to meet others in their chaos, you change the terms of your relationships. Some will evolve with you. Some will fall away. This too is part of the alignment. The people and situations that no longer resonate will naturally dissolve, not through conflict, but through energetic mismatch. You are no longer available for what drains you, because you are rooted in something deeper, quieter, and infinitely more powerful. As this inner foundation strengthens, you begin to notice an odd and beautiful pattern. Life responds differently to you. Opportunities begin to arise without chasing. Peace becomes your baseline, not a vacation. Choices feel clear, not forced. The outside begins to mirror the harmony you've cultivated inside. And you realize it was never about controlling the external. It was always about becoming coherent within. You don't need to manipulate outcomes when you are aligned. You don't need to prove your worth when you are connected to it. You don't need to be everywhere, or everything, when you are at home within yourself. You see clearly now that everything you sought outside was always rooted in a hunger to come back to this place. Silence, to many, feels like a void, an empty space to be filled with words, or distraction. In a world that constantly demands expression, reaction, and explanation, silence is often mistaken for weakness, avoidance, or lack of understanding. But silence is none of these things. Silence is depth. It is not the absence of thought, but the presence of awareness. It is the space where truth's room to rise without being interrupted by ego or noise. It is the ground upon which the unconscious whispers its secrets, if one has the courage and patience to listen. Most people fear silence not because it is empty, but because it is full. Full of everything they've been running from. Full of the voice they've ignored for years. Full of the emotions they never named. full of the truth that makes the illusion harder to maintain. When you become silent, not just externally, but internally, you begin to see the mechanisms of the mind with unsettling clarity. You begin to notice how often your thoughts are not truly your own. They are echoes, repetitions, internalized voices of past influences. In silence, these thoughts have no place to hide. You observe them, stripped of justification, and realize how many of your beliefs are borrowed, how many of your fears are inherited, how much of your identity has been built not from authenticity, but from survival. The silence does not lie. It holds up a mirror, and there is nowhere left to hide from yourself. In the beginning, silence can be unbearable. The mind resists it. It demands stimulation, craves input, begs for desistance. Is not random. It is the ego protecting its fragile structure. Because silence dismantles illusion. It does not entertain the persona you've carefully constructed to navigate the world. It does not flatter your image. It simply waits. And the longer you sit with it, the more it shows you, not in words, but in waves of recognition. It's in the stillness that patterns surface. Emotional triggers, old wounds, unresolved grief, hidden desires, these begin to emerge, not to torment you, but to be seen, integrated, and released. Most answers you seek are not waiting in the world. They're waiting in the quiet corners of your own psyche. But the mind that never pauses, the heart that never rests, the soul that's always outward bound, can't receive those answers. Insight is not something you chase, it's something you allow. In silence, what you once tried to figure out intellectually becomes intuitively clear. You begin to feel your way into truth rather than argue your way toward it. Clarity doesn't arrive as a dramatic revelation. It unfolds slowly, like fog lifting from a landscape you forgot was even there. You stop looking for signs from others because your own inner compass begins to work again. When you live in reaction, always ready to respond, defend, or explain, you're not leading your life, you're being led by it. Silence interrupts that pattern. You reclaim your sovereignty. You don't need to speak to be powerful. You don't need to explain to be understood. In fact, some of the most profound transformations occur in the quiet. Away from validation, away from performance, away from the need to be seen. The ego wants noise because noise feeds its existence. The soul wants silence because silence strengthens its presence. There is a strength that only silence can cultivate. It's not loud. It doesn't seek to convince. It's the kind of strength that remains grounded when everything around you is spinning. The kind that listens deeply, not just to others, but to the undercurrents within yourself. It's the strength that doesn't flinch in the presence of truth, even when that truth requires you to let go of what you once clung to. In silence, you don't collapse under the weight of your inner world. You become intimate with it. You learn to hold it. You learn that not every thought demands a voice, not every emotion needs to be broadcast, not every moment requires a reaction. You begin to speak less. Not because you have less to say, but because what you carry has grown heavier with meaning. And you've learned that silence can sometimes hold more truth than any spoken word. Every time you engage in an argument that doesn't serve your growth, every time you explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, every time you chase approval from people who cannot even see you clearly, you are giving away fragments of your power. It's subtle, almost imperceptible at first, these tiny withdrawals from your own energy field. But over time, they accumulate, leaving you drained, uncentered, and disconnected from your deeper self. You begin to feel scattered, anxious, and overextended, not because life is inherently chaotic, but because you've allowed your attention to be pulled in too many directions that don't align with who you are becoming. Focusing on yourself is not merely a withdrawal from the world, it is a recalibration of your energy. It is the deliberate decision to stop leaking your power into places that offer no return. You begin to see that not every conversation is worth your clarity, not every conflict is worth your peace, not every invitation is meant to be accepted. When you stop giving explanations to those who only want to argue, when you stop entertaining roles that exhaust you, when you stop performing for an audience that never truly applauded you, your energy begins to return. And with it comes focus, intention, and a deeper sense of direction. You realize that what once felt urgent was simply noise. Noise fueled by the ego's hunger for validation, attention, and control. But the more you tune into your own inner rhythm, the more you begin to understand the value of concerting your energy. You start treating your attention as sacred currency. Not to be spent on proving your worth or fixing others, but to be invested in building a life that resonates with your essence. What once triggered you no longer does. Not because you've grown indifferent, but because you've grown selective. You've stopped reacting to everything that moves because you now understand that not all movement is meaningful. When your energy is returned to you, You become powerful in a quiet, unshakable way. You no longer need to speak over others to be heard. Because your presence now carries a weight that does the speaking for you. You no longer need to seek opportunities, because aligned ones begin to find you. The more you center yourself in your own truth, the more magnetic you become. Not in a performative, attention-seeking way, but in a grounded, authentic way that naturally attracts what is meant for you. People feel the shift, even if they can't explain it. You are no longer chasing, you are drawing in, and this drawing in is not magic, it's alignment. It's what happens when your inner and outer worlds begin to match. You are no longer sending mixed signals to the universe. Your intentions are clear, your boundaries are firm. Your focus is rooted. You stop trying to force outcomes because you now trust the process of alignment. You trust that what falls away does so for a reason, and what remains is meant to evolve with you. You begin to experience a sense of flow, not because life has become easy, but because your resistance has lessened. You are no longer wasting energy trying to change what was never yours to control. This quiet conservation of energy becomes a foundation. You become more intentional with your time, more discerning with your relationships, more deliberate with your choices. You don't respond to provocation the way you once did, because your peace has become too precious to gamble. You are not withholding to punish anyone. You are reserving yourself for what nourishes you. You are choosing quality over quantity, presence over performance, depth over distraction. And in this new state, you begin to notice how much lighter you feel, how much clearer your thoughts become. How much more ease enters your life when you no longer participate in the drama you used to call normal. As you return your energy to yourself, you don't become isolated, you become whole. And from that wholeness you begin to offer something far more valuable than noise or reaction. You offer presence, clarity, and authenticity. You offer what is real, and in doing so you give others permission to do the same. Alignment is often misunderstood as something that must be earned, forced, or achieved through struggle, but in truth it is not a destination reached by external effort. It is a state remembered through inner return. Beneath all the layers you've been taught to wear, beneath the identities you've constructed to survive, beneath the expectations you've adopted to belong, there is something in you that has never been lost, only forgotten. Alignment is the natural state of that deeper self. The self that existed before the world told you who to be, how to act, what to pursue, and what to fear. When you focus on yourself and stay silent long enough to hear that deeper voice, you don't become someone new. You remember who you were before you began pretending. This remembrance doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds gradually. As you peel back the layers of conditioning that have shaped your responses, your desires, your relationships, and even your goals, you start to see clearly what you were drawn to out of fear, and what you avoided because of shame. You begin to notice how often you've been performing versions of yourself that were designed not for expression, but for acceptance. The masks you once wore so naturally now feel heavy. The roles you used to play without question now feel constricting. And you start to sense the growing gap between your outer life and your inner truth. At first, that gap may feel uncomfortable. It may feel like dissonance, like the ground beneath you is shifting, like familiar things no longer fit. But that discomfort is a signal, not that you are lost, but that you are waking up. The pieces of your life that were built on compromise and performance begin to fall away. Not because you're failing, but because you're aligning. The people who resonated with your former self may fade into the distance. The dreams you once chased may begin to feel hollow. The goals that once excited you may now feel like burdens. These are not signs of regression, they are signs of refinement. As the outer structures begin to dissolve, a new foundation begins to emerge, one built not on approval but on authenticity. You begin to make decisions that reflect your truth, not your fear. You begin to surround yourself with people who nourish your spirit, not just your ego. You stop needing to explain your path to those who cannot feel it. You stop seeking permission to evolve. You start trusting your own rhythm, your own timing, your own knowing. This is alignment, not a perfect, linear path, but a deep inner coherence between who you are and how you live. In this state, life begins to meet you differently. Opportunities feel less like random strokes of luck and more like inevitable responses to your clarity. Challenges no longer feel like punishments, but like invitations to go deeper. You stop seeing contrast as conflict and begin to see it as guidance. You become less obsessed with outcomes and more attuned to the energy behind your actions. You no longer need to control everything, because you trust yourself to respond with integrity, no matter what unfolds. And perhaps most importantly, you no longer need to be understood by everyone. You realize that the need for universal approval is a trap that dilates your authenticity. You understand that not everyone will see you clearly, especially when your light reminds them of their own shadows. But this no longer shakes you. You do not need to shrink to be accepted. You do not need to explain your evolution to those who are not evolving with you. You simply walk in your truth, quietly and without apology, knowing that those who are meant to walk beside you will find you. Not because you convinced them, but because your energy spoke what your words never could. This is not about becoming better in the eyes of the world. It is about becoming whole in the eyes of your own soul. It is about remembering that what you've been searching for in the world has been within you all along, waiting for the silence, the focus, the return to what was never missing but merely buried underneath every you thought you had to be. So I urge you, withdraw from the noise. Let the world chatter, let it spin, let it judge. Your task is not to silence the world, but to no longer let it govern your spirit. Focus on yourself, not from a place of ego, but from a place of reverence. Stay silent, not because you have nothing to say but because not everything deserves your voice. When you do this, you will witness a quiet miracle. The world around you begins to settle, relationships heal or dissolve with grace, paths appear, purpose returns, and slowly, like stars rearranging themselves in a night sky, you will see everything falls into place. Thank you.